Hello, and welcome to the Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. My name is Ryan, and I am a self-proclaimed Calvin and Hobbes superfan and expert.
And my name is also Ryan, although most people call me Indy.
So let's continue our celebration of 40 years of Calvin and Hobbes, and remember that a few episodes back, we talked about Calvin's dad. Now, in that episode, we were originally going to talk about both parents, but we realized if we did that, it would be like 3 hours long, so we decided to divide the two episodes up. So now let's take some time to talk about Calvin's mom.
Which is good because since we divided it up, I got some questions. So specifically, my mom heard that we were doing an episode on Calvin's dad, and that's, well, are you going to talk about his mom too? And so, yes, to my mom, I can put your mind at rest. We are indeed talking about Calvin's mom. We're very pro motherhood here and pro mom in general. So that wasn't any kind of gross-esque sexism, or we're not discounting her. So yes, both dad and mom get episodes of their own.
Yeah, honestly, we did dad first because dad shows up first. That was pretty much the reasoning behind that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, he's, like we talked about, you could make a case that he's the first character introduced. I mean, he and Calvin kind of together. It sort of depends on where your eye lands. So yeah, dad is one of the first characters introduced, and mom actually isn't, though.
yeah, it's a little bit strange. We'll talk in a sec about when she shows up for the first time, but it actually took a little while to get her in there, and she's an important character, so there's plenty to say about her. So, like Calvin's dad, mom is never given a name because, as far as the strip is concerned, her role is as Calvin's mom. And Bill Watterson was very deliberate about not giving the parents names because they are Calvin's parents. So, as we discussed in the dad episode, this meant Uncle Max couldn't call either of Calvin's parents by name, which had the potential to be awkward. And similarly, no other adults could call either parent by name. So there's, the clerk at the grocery store, there's Calvin's barber, there's Calvin's doctor. None of them can refer to Calvin's mom or dad by their name.
And a lot of them don't have names either. So there's some adults in the strip that do. So we have Miss Wormwood's probably the most
Yeah,
prominent example.
although
There's
she doesn't have a first name.
no. There's also the principal and the
Mhm.
gym teacher. Do you remember their names?
Well, so the principal is Mr. Spittle.
Right.
I am not clear on whether the person you're talking about is the gym teacher. So Calvin's baseball coach is Mr. Lockjaw.
Okay.
It's unclear whether he is a gym teacher or a teacher of some other class who is coaching baseball at recess. I don't know.
That's true. I think that's fair. And because there is another one where Calvin does seem to be in PE, and he's told to get on the chin up bar by the Twisted Space Frog.
Yeah, and that's
But
not Mr. Lockjaw.
right, that's clearly a different character. So you might be right. Maybe we have an unnamed gym teacher, and then Mr. Lockjaw, who coaches baseball, may have some other job, or I guess he could be a second PE teacher or something like that. But
Yeah.
that's,
And while
that's
we're on the subject of adults with names, there's the barber. You remember the barber's name?
this is an interesting question. So I'm going to play an Uno reverse here.
Okay.
Do you remember the barber's name? Because actually, I think this is an interesting trivia question.
Well, I think there's actually at least two of them. So there's Pete, because there's one where Calvin asks for some sort of crazy haircut, and then he says, ma'am, and mom says, just give him the usual, Pete.
Yes.
And then there's also the one where Calvin wanted the phrase, I may have a bad haircut, but you're downright ugly, shaved into the back of his head. And when he finds out he didn't get that, he walks back into the barbershop and says, all right, Charlie, give me back my tip.
All right, very good. So yeah, so I'm not really surprised you got this, but this is a decent stab at a trivia question that might have been able to stump you. Because yeah, there's actually two barbers, like you said.
Yeah.
There's Pete and there's Charlie, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon, right? Like you'd almost think, Calvin has a barber as opposed to multiple, but
Yeah.
I guess not. So yeah, that's kind of a fun fact. There's actually two named barbers in the strip.
Yeah. And then there is one other teacher with a name. Can you think of who that is?
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's see. I believe it's Frank. Is that right?
Oh,
Because
okay. I wasn't thinking of Frank, but yeah, I think that is correct. You're thinking of a Spaceman Spiff strip, right?
Right. So Spaceman Spiff escapes, and it's the class. But he ducks into a cave, which turns out to be the teacher's lounge. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it's Fred rather than Frank. So
Yeah, because there's a Frank in another strip, but that's an imaginary character. But yeah,
okay, that's right. Yeah. So this was Fred, not Frank. But yeah, it is
yeah,
the
yeah.
Spaceman Spiff one. He ducks into a cave, which turns out to be the teacher's lounge. He runs away after seeing these supposed aliens, and then we don't see the human forms of the aliens, but it's clearly teachers saying, "Who is that? Beats me, Fred." So,
Yeah.
all right, so that's the one I was thinking of, and then, but it sounds like there's another one. Let me think.
There's another one. Yeah.
Okay, I know that they have a substitute teacher at one point. I'm
Yep.
not
So
sure if
there's
I
a couple
remember.
subs, and this
Okay,
is one of them.
I'm not sure I remember her name though. You may have gotten me on this one.
It's a he. It's Mr. Kneecapper.
That's right, Mr. Kneecapper.
Yeah, I heard he killed a kid last year.
Is that the one where he says, and then there were funny lumps in the school beanie weenies or something?
Yeah, or the meatloaf or something. Yeah.
That's right. And then Susie is like, oh, wait till she finds out what we're having for cafeteria today.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
I forgot about Mr. Kneecapper. All right. So we have Miss Wormwood, Mr. Kneecapper, Fred, who we don't know his last name. And I believe the other substitute is unnamed, but I could just be forgetting
Yeah,
her.
I don't think the other substitute was given a name, but we do see her.
Okay. And Mr.
Actually,
the PE, or not, the baseball coach and an unnamed PE teacher.
yeah, and actually that other sub is another fun fact that I only learned relatively recently. There's a strip that she's in that is the only strip I know of where none of the main characters are shown. So we only see her on screen, and she says, all right, which one of you is Calvin? And Calvin from off screen says, not me, but we don't actually see him or Susie or any of the other main characters in that strip.
Right. That is a really good trivia question. I think neither one of us got that right the first time we heard it. So like that's a pretty deep cut. So well done to the person who saw that. I think that's unique in the strip where there's no main character shown.
I can't think of any other where that happens. So bringing it back to Mom, none of these characters can call Mom by name.
And she can't call many of them by name either, but that's
also true. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But importantly, on that note, the fact that the parents don't have names also means that they can't call each other by name. So whenever Dad feeds Calvin bogus information, it's common for Mom, usually from off screen, to say here, because she can't call him by whatever his name would be. Or there's at least one time where Calvin asks Dad why Mom doesn't dress like the lady in the car commercial, and Dad says, yeah, why don't you dress like that? And Mom says, because your adolescent fantasy requires an adolescent model with implants, honey. So again, can't call him by name.
She might not have wanted to at that point either.
Well, true.
Yeah. Now, I always found this one a bit of an odd strip / odd remark from Calvin. It's like I don't know. It's funny, and I like that we get this really amusing, angry expression of Calvin's mom. It's like this sort of, I don't want to say evil looking just because it seems like justified wrath here, but a kind of evil looking, angry expression where she's, clearly clenching her teeth and smiling, even though she's furious at him.
Yeah, smiling in a dangerous sort of way, you might say.
Dangerous, yeah. That's good. That's sort of like when Calvin asks his dad if he's going to get a new running mate for when he's with his dad, and she kind of comes up and she's sort of looks like she's going to clobber him if he doesn't say the right thing there. So, but this is even more dangerous than that.
Yeah. Real quick, I forgot to put this anywhere in our notes. There is another strip with poles, because the one you're talking about is a strip with poles, a running mate. You can't be dad without mom, all that stuff. There's another one where Calvin says that the constituents are looking at, basically voting dad out and making mom dad. And dad says, and what do you know about that? And mom says, my first act will be to make you do the cooking. And Calvin says, whoa, this changes everything.
Yeah, which is interesting because there actually is a strip where Calvin's dad does the cooking, at least
That's
sort
true.
of.
Well, yeah.
Which maybe we'll talk about that more later because it also relates to mom in certain ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Yeah, but again, I always thought that was kind of a weird strip. There's kind of a similar one where Calvin asked Dad, like, why do you live here in a house with mom and not in an apartment with several scantily clad female roommates?
Boy, ask
Where,
a simple question and get all your TV privileges revoked.
right. And there's kind of side note. Do you think this is a reference specifically to the show Three's Company?
I couldn't tell you. I've never actually watched the show. I assume that by the fact that you're asking that it involves someone living with scantily clad female roommates.
Yeah, funnily enough, so you picked up on that pretty quick. I mean, I don't know exactly how scantily clad they were, and again, when this came out, I was really too young to understand most of what was going on. So I was actually kind of forbidden to watch it, except when I did watch it, like I don't think I got any of the material that would have been the reason why I wasn't supposed to be watching it.
Hmm.
So one of those things. But yeah, I mean the as I understand it, like later I found out what the plot really was. It's a man who has two female roommates, but because this isn't really allowed, he pretends that he's gay, so the landlord will be okay with it and not throw him out.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I guess
Okay.
kind of a different time because I kind of think, well, is that even legal to try to throw someone out for that? But I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever the
Huh.
case may be. But yeah, so that always kind of struck me as maybe that's the specific show that Calvin could be alluding to here, and possibly because I would have been about Calvin's age when that was going on too. So
Yeah. Yeah. Seems plausible then.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter for the strip. I just always thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, I have nothing else to say to that.
Yeah, well, master of the segue, as you
Yeah,
mentioned.
exactly. We've established this. Yeah. But as we've said, this episode isn't about mom and dad, it's about mom. So let's take a closer look at her character. So we just talked a little bit earlier about how mom isn't actually shown or mentioned in the first strip, and she's actually not shown or mentioned in the entire first week of daily strips. She's only mentioned in the first Sunday strip, where this is the one where dad comes into the room and Calvin thinks he's a monster and shoots him with a bunch of darts. And then dad says, "Dear, will you come up here a minute?" So he's calling to Calvin's mom, but we still don't see her. And obviously, she's not being called by name. Her first actual appearance isn't until a couple days after that in the ninth strip that ran. So this is where Calvin is asking mom if he can drive the car. And, she says, "No, well, can I just steer while you work the gas and brakes? Or can I work the gas and brakes while you steer?" And she won't let him. And he says, "Oh, you never let me do anything." That's mom's first appearance.
It is, and we get almost an interesting insight in her character too, because throughout she has this, I guess, kind of resigned, tired expression. I mean, not in a bad way, but it's just clear like, oh, same old, same old. Calvin's trying to do all this clearly dangerous things that I could never allow, and then complaining about it when I know, like, all right, yep, here we go. So that gives
Yep.
us a bit of an insight there. I also think a kind of interesting phenomenon is because we don't see her right away, a role that is kind of taken over by her for most of the strip. We sort of initially get Calvin's dad doing that. So I'm thinking of at the dinner table, it was a very
Mm.
early strip, obviously, but Calvin saying, like, what is this? And the dad's saying, oh, just try it. You'll like it. What is it? That means I'll hate it right now. Just try it. And so this is the kind of thing that would become associated with Calvin's mom later. But the first instance is actually Calvin's dad sort of taking that role.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't really know what the underlying reason for that might be, but you're right.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, presumably Bill Watterson had it planned out that we're going to have a dad and a mom at first.
Well, yeah, I
But
mean, she was in this ninth strip, so they
yeah,
had to have
but
that figured out pretty quick.
right. But from the first eight, you could almost wonder, does Calvin even have a mother? The strip could have been like, oh, a single father and his imaginative son with an imaginary friend.
Yeah, yeah, would have been hard to know in those first few days.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know a lot about what Calvin's mom did before Calvin came along, but with Calvin there, she is a stay-at-home mom. So quick shout out to all the stay-at-home moms out there. We are, pro women in the workforce. We acknowledge that that is a worthwhile pursuit, and more power to you. We also acknowledge that being a stay-at-home parent is a real job and very much worthy of respect. So I'll just throw out, my mom was a stay-at-home mom during particularly my early childhood, and I was grateful for that. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and people sometimes ask me, does your wife work? And my response is usually, well, not for money, but she definitely works.
That works quite a bit, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out that's actually a lot of work to be a stay-at-home mom or any kind of mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, we're pro homemaker, pro women in the workforce, just pro whatever you want, basically.
Right. Now, whatever, we know that she's a stay-at-home mom when Calvin comes along, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that might be in a minute. But we do know that mom probably went to college. We also know that apparently in her younger days, she liked to party, or at least she looked like a bimbo, according to Calvin, which, that's Calvin's perspective.
Who's the bimbo?
Exactly. Pretty funky hairdo, mom. Because what is he looking at in that strip?
So that is an old prom picture, and I believe this also relates to polls. So he's talking about how there's, people have to know that that Calvin's dad has a good character. He's like, well, what's the problem with this? It's like, well, who's this bimbo with you in this old prom picture?
Yeah.
That bimbo is your mother. Who's a bimbo?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because this also suggests that Calvin's parents knew each other in high school, which I believe parallels Bill Watterson and the woman that he would eventually marry. Didn't they know each other in high school also?
I think that's correct. I'm not 100% certain of that, but that sounds right.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it could have been college, but I'm almost certain they knew each other in high school. So it's kind of a fun detail that apparently Calvin's parents did too, if they went to prom together.
Yeah, I know there's a picture from one of Bill Watterson's yearbooks out there of him, and I think maybe in the same yearbook you can find his wife. So yeah. I think so.
Do you know anyone who knew each other in high school and then got married?
Yeah, actually, one of my really good friends in high school married another friend of both of ours. So
Wow.
It does happen. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I don't think I knew anyone personally in my high school, but actually my aunt and uncle met in high school and then obviously dated and then eventually married. But not only that, they stayed living in the town where they knew each other in high school, raised their kids there, and their kids went to the same high school.
Oh,
yeah.
that's interesting.
I know. So that's pretty unusual, but a lot of continuity there. I always thought that was kind of a neat thing about them and my cousins.
Yeah, that is kind of cool.
So well, yeah, back to this. So
yeah, right.
Dad and mom seem to have known each other in high school.
Yeah, mom they probably went to college together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure she went to college. Don't know what she studied, but supposedly she got some sort of job between marrying dad and when Calvin was born, or possibly she already had it before they got married. In any case, Calvin's dad does tell Calvin that before he was born, mom had a very stressful job. And now she's the one to stay home because, according to dad, she had gotten used to it. So we figured she should be the one to. And Calvin goes, hey.
Yeah, which I always loved how matter of fact and deadpan Calvin's dad is here, because the whole thing, it seems like it's just a normal response to the innocent question. Oh, how come mom stays here while you go to work? And then, it's just all this buildup. And then, well, she'd gotten used to the stress and aggravation. So
yeah. Well, and Calvin's assumption was that she wanted to quit because of the stress and aggravation.
Like to get away from it. Boy, the joke's on her, I guess.
Yeah. So we don't know what exactly the job was, what she studied, but just because I'm a nerd, I'm going to throw a hypothesis out there with pretty weak evidence. I think she might have studied some sort of science. And my reason for that is when we talked a few episodes back about dad giving a bogus explanation for the theory of relativity, it sounds like mom's explanation might have been correct. So, or
Or
at
at
least
least
better than dad's.
better than changing time zones by going west.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
even a wrong explanation that tried to be better than that, I mean, would give more credit to.
Right. So we don't know exactly what her explanation was, but it sounds like it was probably at least closer to the truth. And, you don't have to be a scientist to know something about relativity, but more likely that you are if you do know something about relativity.
That's true.
Calvin also talks to his mom about how gravity works. He talks about how space is like a big sheet, and if you have a massive body like a planet, it folds the sheet in and stuff rolls towards the planet. And then he explains how gravity had an effect when he dropped the pitcher of lemonade
While he
and
was on roller skates.
on roller skates. Yes. Uh, so, he's explaining this to his mom. So maybe she didn't already know how it worked and he thought he was teaching her something new, or maybe he was telling her because he thought she would find it interesting. But anyway, she might know about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
She
I would
also
say
seems
also, oh, just real quick about the relativity thing. I mean, the other clue that is probably something at least close to right is Calvin's reaction. So the bogus time zone one, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, mom said something different. She must be totally off her rocker. So it's not
right.
just, oh, she said something different that must be wrong. It's what she said sounded crazy, but as it turns out, when you get into relativity, it does sound kind of crazy, even though that seems to actually be true. So
Yes, yeah, absolutely agreed. It's completely mind bending. I don't understand it, but
no, but part of the point is like, well, yeah, the accurate one is the one that sounds ridiculous, and that's
yeah,
maybe something we'll talk about in another episode too, in a different context.
right. Yeah. So, and then on top of those things, mom seems to encourage Calvin's interest in science. She gets him books about snakes and dinosaurs, and one where he learns that wasps lay their eggs inside of spiders, and that does kind of gross her out, but she gets him these books. So it's possible that she's just encouraging Calvin's interest and she's not a scientist herself, but I think it's at least a possibility that we should acknowledge that if mom didn't study science in college, she's at least interested in it.
Yeah, that seems fair. And it'd be kind of cool if she had been some kind of scientist before. It maybe adds another dimension to the strip, maybe sort of with Calvin's love of space and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
No, another
certainly could be a stressful job.
oh, definitely. And now another possibility, since her job supposedly had a lot of stress and aggravation, it could be something different. So maybe
Sure.
she had to work retail or some kind of customer service, which those can be pretty aggravating, having to deal with people sometimes. On the other hand, we could also ask how seriously we should take Dad's claim about her job, since he could have just been setting up the joke we were talking about. Now, I
Right.
always kind of took it as that was true, but then he threw in the zinger there.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of how I took it. But yeah, we don't know for sure.
yeah, I think then the other facet is, since we've talked about he's a patent attorney and seems to do fairly well based on that. I mean, attorney is a fairly lucrative position. There could also be just a purely economic reason, like, well, obviously this income is higher than the other one, so that's why she stays home. So it's hard to be certain, but yeah, I like your idea that we get some clues about maybe what she used to do, or at least interests and knowledge that she had.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna throw out there, some people online apparently have proposed other things that she could be in and seem to think that she couldn't be something like a scientist because she liked to party. Look,
What?
we're nerds, but we still like to have fun, okay?
Yeah, I think some people I know would be very shocked to find out that scientists can't party or have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, listen, I wasn't much of a party animal myself, but there are scientists who are.
Yeah, you've heard of parties.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, that seems like a weird take, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I I guess I'll also say this is with weak evidence, but I'm just gonna speculate that people like to have fun and do fun things, no matter what their profession or academic
Right.
career may be. I don't know. I guess I can't verify that. Anecdotally, that seems right, though.
You can't survey everyone, but it's probably true. Yeah.
True. I guess self-reports can be unreliable, but still.
Yeah, yeah. So coming back to mom's personality and getting away from college now a little bit, we know that at one point she says she hopes that Calvin has a kid that puts him through what he puts her through. And Calvin says, "Yeah, that's what grandma says. Grandma says she used to say that to you." And so, as calm as mom seems to be as an adult, it does sound like she might have been a pretty rambunctious kid.
And this is pretty fascinating and funny since we only ever see her perspective as the seemingly undeservedly stressed out mother. So you're right. Like she comes across, I mean, not that she's always calm. I mean, she kind of loses her cool sometimes when Calvin does certain things, but I mean, understandably so, right? That's not a
Right.
criticism of her. I think it's any parent. She does better than most parents, I think, probably. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe her own mother would have a different perspective. I find that hilarious. So
Right.
now, do you think she might have been as rambunctious as Calvin was?
That is kind of hard to imagine. uh, I mean, maybe, that's hard to comment on. I don't know. She might have been. I'm going to say no. I don't think she was quite as rambunctious as Calvin because he's way up there.
Yeah, I agree actually. So I think it's interesting what Calvin's grandma says, and she probably did put her mother through certain things, but it's hard to imagine that it would have gotten to the level of Calvin just because of how singular Calvin's antics seem to be.
Yeah.
Also, maybe there's a clue to that in that mom would be less surprised about certain things potentially if she'd put her own mother through this. So there's a few strips, I think there's at least two where we see her reading child psychology books. Or there's
Mm.
one where she's reading them and another one she references them. Like I believe in this one, Calvin's been the victim of some pounce attacks from Hobbes. So then he starts walking through the house with a football helmet on and pillows tied around him. And then
Right.
you see his mom thinking, those child psychology books we bought were such a waste of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another time when we see her reading maybe the same psychology books. This is during the good duplicate story arc, which I won't go into a lot here because we'll devote more time to that in a future episode. But
Yeah.
in any case, this is a long-winded way of saying I think she probably was rambunctious in some sense, but I think Calvin is probably putting her through way more than she put her own mother through. So that's
Yeah.
some epic grandma revenge there, we might say.
He takes it to another level. Yeah. Now that's all I can really think of regarding any backstory that we have about mom, unless there's anything else you can think of that I've missed.
There's not a lot. I mean, I think the only thing we might know is that, so like we were talking about, Calvin's parents seem to have met in high school,
Yeah.
but I mean, they obviously didn't get married right away. There's one strip I mentioned where Calvin's dad is doing the cooking because mom is sick. And
Right.
during the course of this, he says, as you can see, I survived 2 years of my own cooking when I had an apartment after college.
Mm.
So it seems like they didn't get married or live together until at least like 2 years after graduating college, or at least from when dad graduated college, if they're not the same age exactly.
Right.
So this
Yeah, that's a
doesn't
good
really tell us
clue.
a lot about mom's backstory, other than the fact that during that point, she presumably was still living on her own, presumably supporting herself in whatever that aggravating job was. And I guess probably had her own apartment too. She could have still lived at home, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that
again,
does.
that's not a lot, but that's the only other thing I can really think about that talks about the time before Calvin's, the BC days, and before
Right. That's
marriage.
what's important.
That's what's important.
Yeah. So, but whatever mom was doing before Calvin came along, before she got married, she tends to be a much more reliable source of information than dad. So we already talked about the relativity thing. She usually calls dad out on his garbage, whatever bogus information he's feeding Calvin. And back in episode 1, we talked about how Dad claims that Calvin was either a blue light special at Kmart or that he was dumped down the chimney by a big hairy pterodactyl. Well, Mom has a little bit of a different story. Would you like to fill us in on that, Indy?
Yeah, so there's the part where the story arc where Calvin breaks Dad's binoculars, and Hobbs suggests, well, maybe he could talk to his mom first and she could think of something to help the situation. And he says, at times like this, all Mom can think about is how long she was in labor with me.
Right.
So, yeah, so she's very clear that he was not dumped down the chimney by a pterodactyl or otherwise, or assembled from a kid in Kmart. Wouldn't that be nice, ladies out there? You just assemble your kid. But no, you have to push him out through your body in a laborious, hours-long process, so nicely called labor.
Right. So, and on that note, in another, actually, couple of strips, Calvin alludes to this. So, in one, he asks Mom if he was adopted, and she says no in no uncertain terms. Now, she uses the phrase ridiculous ideas, and I think maybe the ridiculous ideas are meant to refer more to the other stuff that Calvin brings up, which are namely that they're going to put him to work in a cannery when he turns 7 and that they're fattening him up to eat him. I don't think she was meaning for the adoption thing to be a ridiculous idea. More on that in a second. And in a similar strip, Calvin is storming around saying he's in a bad mood, and Mom tells him to go be in a bad mood somewhere else. And he says, I bet my biological mother would have bought me a comic book and made me feel better instead of shunning me like you. And she says, kid, anyone but your biological mother would have left you to the wolves long ago.
Probably so.
Now, Watterson, specifically of the first one, said, boy, did I get letters about this one. He said that people were mad that he would conflate the idea of being adopted with the idea of child labor and cannibalism, and that he thought the contrast was so outrageous that nobody would take it seriously, but apparently some people take everything seriously.
Yeah,
Now,
whenever I've read that strip, it always read to me like a progression, right? So
yeah,
Mom, I adopted. That's it's something a kid might ask after they've heard about adoption. It doesn't necessarily mean they think it's bad or weird or whatever. But then, oh, are you going to put me to work in a cannery when I'm 7? Now it's like a more
sorry, what?
yeah, more silly idea. And then you're not fattening me up to eat me. All right, now we've got peak absurdity here. So yeah, to me, I never took it as that these were being conflated. It's that the ideas get progressively more extreme or what have you. So yeah, so my impression was never that, oh man, he's saying that being adopted is like being forced into child labor or being eaten. But yeah, that never seemed to me what was being implied there.
Yeah, but interestingly, both comics were changed in the Complete Calvin and Hobbes and possibly in later printings of the individual books. I don't know, I haven't checked that. But in the Complete Calvin and Hobbes, instead of asking if he was adopted, he asks if he was genetically engineered or cloned. And instead of saying, I bet my biological mother would have, bought me a comic book, he says, a good mother would have bought me a comic book and made me feel better. And I'm mostly with Watterson on this, that the contrast was so absurd it shouldn't have been taken seriously. And just to be clear, neither of us is okay with disparaging adoption. In fact, I have an adopted kid myself, and so does Watterson, as far as I know. So I don't think he's okay with disparaging adoption either, and I don't think that that's what either comic was doing. I guess I can see why it bothered some people, and I guess if it's causing a problem, it's best to just address it. But I think the original version of the strips are funny, and I think they're portraying Calvin being a brat. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And with the second strip in particular, I feel like the change actually makes it worse. So if you take the original version, it's like, oh, I bet my biological mom would have done this. To me, that reads like a kid just, even if he is kind of annoyed, like almost more sort of joking around, like this is something I can imagine someone saying, oh yeah, I bet, like, I don't know, I might even said that to my own mom who is my biological mother. So yeah, to me that just seems like, oh yeah, haha, I'm being sarcastic or annoyed or whatever. I bet my biological mom would have done this. But if you say, I bet a good mom would have done this, then Calvin comes across as really mean there. It's like, he's not just sort of saying something that he's annoyed about. It's like he's accusing her of being a bad mom. And so I feel like that change actually changes the strip and Calvin's character for the worse in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. That it's snarky to say biological mother would have done this nice thing for me, and to have the implication that an adoptive parent somehow doesn't love their kid as much as their biological parent would. But it was Calvin being snarky and not meant to be taken seriously. But yeah, when it becomes you're not a good mother, yeah, it's kind of more direct. Like you're actually doing something bad that
Yeah.
harms me or something.
Right. It moves from kind of being bratty or snarky to actually being like just hostile and nasty or something. So
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like that change had that unfortunate side effect there.
yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, to bring it back to the other thing too, though, I agree. I never took it as disparaging adoption, the original versions of either of those strips, but I can see how some people might have not liked what they saw as a potential implication there. So yeah, just like we're pro women in the workforce and pro homemakers, we're also pro adoption and pro biological children because families come in a lot of different forms, and it's all about loving the people you're related to, whether that's by blood or law or I guess whatever way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But anyway, it's interesting to note that that change was made, and also it's interesting that Calvin's mom is much more direct about where Calvin did in fact come from.
That's true. And on that point, there actually is one more theory slash explanation about where Calvin came from. Do you remember what that is?
Hmm.
So we've got dumped down the chimney by the pterodactyl or assembled from the kit that could come from Sears, but in Calvin's case was a blue light special at Kmart. But there's one more explanation that someone poses.
Hmm. Yeah. Hobbes suggests that people grow from spores.
Oh, you know what? That's not even the one that I was thinking about, but
Oh,
okay,
okay,
that's another
okay.
one
So
too.
there's another one. All right. What one were you thinking of?
Okay, this is also Hobbes. I believe this is the strip where Hobbes supposedly has a secret because Cal reads that tigers are secretive animals.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
Yep.
secret's about him, and it ends up being that his parents bought him at a flea market,
Yeah, that's right. And he went.
specifically for a nickel.
Yeah. Well, and actually, now that we're talking about this, there's one that he asks if he was ever a grub, and that
Right.
was Dad feeding him that information.
Yeah, that he pupated at age 2.
Yeah. So, a couple of different bogus sources there. Yeah, this is getting better.
Yeah, I guess you could combine some of those, right? Like maybe you go to Sears or Kmart in Calvin's case, you buy the kit, but what you put together is a grub that then
Uh,
pupates at age 2, and I guess at that point becomes a boy, maybe? Or
yeah, I don't know, something like that.
yeah, you could at least in theory combine some of those.
Yeah, well, it also makes me think now that you say that, because what boys are made of, that the strip does acknowledge the whole snips and snails and puppy dog tails thing. So, what are tigers made of, though?
Let's see, I believe it's dragonflies and katydids, but mostly chewed up little kids.
Yes, I love it. But once again, coming back to mom,
Oh yeah,
um,
Calvin's
yeah,
mom.
yeah. So, like all the characters in Calvin and Hobbes, mom does have a personality. She's not just this one dimensional character. So we have some interests, we have some clues about things that mom seems to like to do. We don't get a ton of focus on them, but we do get some clues. So she seems to like gardening. We see her out doing some sort of gardening or another in spring and summer. Sometimes we see her working with potted plants inside. So she seems to like that sort of thing. She also seems to be responsible for performing a lot of the house maintenance. That's probably not really a hobby, but she does uh, engage in that a lot. And she does note that whatever isn't falling apart in the house is being actively destroyed.
That's
So
true. Although Calvin does at least offer to try to help sometimes too, rather than destroy things. So there's one strip where he comes up to his mom and says something like, "Do you need anything hammered? I've got a hammer and lots of nails." And oh no, are you sure I can hammer it? And then she says, no. So he's kind of dejected later. Mom wanted a girl. I just know it. I think Hobbs says, "Well, did she want anything sawed?"
yeah. On a similar note, there is one where he offers his services and mom does accept them, although it's a little bit of a trick. So he asks to vacuum, and you
Oh,
know
that's
how that one goes. Yeah. She's
yeah, a
like,
bit of
"Well,
a
I
Tom
don't
Sawyer
know."
thing there.
Yeah. And she's like, "Well, do you think you can do a good job?" He's like, "I'll do a great job. Come on, let me do it." And so she lets him, and he's like, "That suppressed smile worries me." So, you
Yeah.
know, yeah. He helps around the house occasionally.
Hey,
We
on
also
vacuuming, when you were a kid, did you have one of those toys that was like, it was like a plastic supposed vacuum, but it had like a plastic dome and then there were colored balls in it that would like go all around as you pushed it?
Yeah, I didn't have one, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I had like friends who had them and stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I distinctly remember having one of those myself, and I think some friends too. But like, it's always kind of funny to me that some of our toys as children are basically like, here's a fake version of something an adult would do for work, but like it's fun for the child to do it, but then it's not fun to have to do the actual chore if you're made to do it. So like if I pretend to
Yeah.
vacuum, oh, I'm having a great time, but then I don't know, maybe I'm a little older, like I don't want to have to vacuum, but I want to
Yeah.
have fun. It's like, but
You
that
know,
was
it's funny you say that because in my house we have a toy vacuum and a toy lawnmower. So
okay.
yeah. Yeah. The lawnmower blows bubbles. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that is fun.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, isn't really the same, but it makes me think of those bubble pipes you can get, or
Mm.
it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
so you blow bubbles. I remember Cookie Monster used to have those on Sesame Street, specifically when they were doing Monster Piece Theater, and he was
Yeah.
Alistair Cookie. He'd be there in the red jacket and the bubble pipe. So,
Yeah, I remember that. Yep, that was great. A couple other hobbies that mom has. She seems to like to read, and I don't have a lot to say about that, but we often uh, come onto the scene with her reading a book or a magazine or something.
and Dad
She,
too, actually, they share
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's true. And she may like some other quiet activities like maybe cross stitch or knitting or some sort of sewing adjacent activity, which incidentally, or maybe not so incidentally, is another call out to Bill Watterson's wife, Melissa. So apparently she's into quilting and even has a website called Melissa the Quilter. So if anyone wants to look that up and see her work, you can see that. But anyway, that may mean that Calvin's mom has some similar interests to Bill Watterson's wife. So keep that in
Although there is a strip where she has to make the onion costume, and she
mind.
says, "I'm not much of a seamstress,
That's
so
true. That's true. So I don't know. Maybe I mean we see her whip a needle and thread sometimes to like sew hobs, but I think there's at
a
least
lot of
one
times
where
Hobbs."
yeah, but there seems to be at least one where she's doing something for herself. Could be cross stitch or something like that. But
Yeah,
uh,
which
yeah,
is different
yeah,
than
yeah,
sewing. I'm given to believe. I don't really understand the difference, but there's knitting, crocheting, cross stitch, sewing. So
yeah. They're
yeah, I don't
definitely not all the same thing.
right. I don't think like, but
Yeah, but
I'm told they're not the same.
right. But among all these interests that she does have, one thing we do know that she does not like is camping. And we'll have a whole episode on camping later. But when referring to Dad's enjoyment of camping, she calls him Conan the Barbarian. And at one point, even goes so far as to say that any judge would take at least one of the camping trips that they went on as grounds for divorce.
Much to Calvin's delight that she says this.
Dad, Mom says, yeah,
I
I know.
know.
So now we've established a little bit about Mom as a character. Let's look at her relationship with Calvin. Now, there's a lot of stress in this relationship, as we've already kind of established. So
Stress
there's
and
just,
aggravation.
yeah, there's just the usual stuff that comes with being a parent about kids griping that you won't let them, whatever, drive the car in Calvin's case, or, jump off the roof or whatever thing the kid wants to do. There's getting him to
you act like I'm not even wearing a bungee cord.
yes, yeah, and there's getting him to bed. There's making sure he gets to school and that he does his homework. Just all the usual stuff that a parent has to make sure their kid does or doesn't do. There's also just some other responsibilities, both related to taking care of yourself and taking care of a kid. Mom is generally the one who does the cooking in their family, and dad, I think, is appreciative of it. Actually, we don't usually see him explicitly thank her, so maybe that's something he could work on. But in any case,
the only reference to that kind of stands out is I think there's one where it's more that he's scolding Calvin. It's like,
yeah,
you're gonna eat this dinner that your mom worked hard on, or something like that. So it's sort of implied recognition of her hard work. Although you're right, I don't recall any instance where we just see him like thanking her or something.
yeah. Although it's possible that happens off screen. In any case, he's not unappreciative. He's not,
Right.
complaining about the food.
Do you remember the one time he did complain about the food?
Well, I know one where he got confused about what the food was because mom told Calvin it was monkey heads, and so then when Calvin is commenting on, oh, is that a brain? Oh, I didn't realize they'd be so squishy. Dad is like, what? I thought these were stuffed peppers. What is this? Whatever it is, I'm not eating it.
Right. So she got Calvin to eat it, but then it moved to the dad refusing to eat it. So
yeah.
But I think that's the only time we see him doing anything like complaining about the food.
Yeah, and that was a miscommunication. That is easily resolved by saying, they are stuffed peppers, just don't Calvin, So
they're not really monkey head, dummy.
right. Yeah. But Calvin, on the other hand, is usually less than appreciative of mom's food. So he doesn't like hamburger casserole, or maybe he does. If he suppresses the gag reflex, it's not so bad.
All right. Once he knows that it's hamburger, then somehow he doesn't dislike it like he did. It seems audible now.
At least he can choke it down.
Right.
So, yeah. He also doesn't like tortellini, or at least he thinks he doesn't, although he's not completely sure what tortellini is. And whatever it was that his favorite meal of all time was last week, now he hates it. He has also been known to characterize mom's food as smelling like bat barf, or upon seeing the food, saying that somebody puked on his plate, which that's the hamburger casserole one. There's also one where he takes a bite of food and decides that it's disgusting, takes a drink of water to try to wash it down. That doesn't work, and he spits it all out on the floor. And somehow the parents don't notice that he's done this because mom just comments on the discolored spot on the rug getting bigger all the time. But anyway, all of this feels fairly relatable as far as kids not necessarily liking the food that they're given.
Yeah, it is, although I think it's unclear how much of this is genuine and how much is either performance or sort of psyching himself out. So we talked about this a little bit before, but like the hamburger casserole, it's like, oh, hush, this hamburger, there's nothing in there you don't like. It's, oh, okay, well, I'm not throwing up when I eat this now. Weird. So there's that. There's the one when Rosalind babysits. He's like, you didn't do it the way my mom does. I like the way mom does it better. So, he's complaining, but in this case, it's like, oh, I'm complaining because I like the way mom does it, not the way you nasty old. I think that's a Barracuda reference.
That's one of the cases where he calls her a Barracuda. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the cases where he just has sort of wild runaway imagination about what the food actually is. So there's two I think of. One, he sees a nature program about a mother bird like regurgitating food to serve to the young. So then he's kind of like skeptical or freaked out when his mom serves dinner. And then one I like even more, I love the visuals in this one. She spends an hour making a meal that, from Calvin's point of view, includes, let me see if I can remember all this. There's an octopus, weed killer, paint. What else goes in here?
I think there's some gasoline.
That's right, gasoline. She shoves it all in the pan using a toilet plunger.
And and I think there might be a shrunken head even.
That's right, yeah, shrunken head. So then she serves a plate. He goes, I'm not eating this. I saw what went in it. And
Yeah.
of course, that's silly. It wasn't that stuff, but I love all that visual though, and you see that leading up just to the reality where it's clearly not all those things. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
So
it seems like Calvin maybe sometimes genuinely doesn't like what his mom cooks, but this can't all be real. So there's clearly things that he does like too.
yeah, well, and you know what? That actually also feels real to me. I can totally see that. You know, we with my kids sometimes we get I don't like this food. And we're like, you were begging for this like 30 minutes ago, and you know I don't like cheese. No, that's not true because you go in the fridge and get cheese out without permission. And so
Maybe
it's
it's like oh, go ahead.
well, it just feels accurate that a kid will kind of jerk you around like that sometimes.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in an overall sense, it's accurate. I just think like it can't be that everything his mom cooks you think is revolting. I mean,
Right.
yeah, that's just not what's going on. And there are some where Calvin even talks about liking some of the things that were made.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Now I wonder with your children, like maybe it's sort of the thing where like Hobbs will say, "Oh, the food tastes better when you chase it down or whatever." So
Mm,
if you get the cheese out of the fridge, well, that's one thing. But if your dad just hands it to you, it's like, "Oh, I don't like
yeah.
that."
Yeah, the thrill of the hunt wasn't there. That's the problem. Okay.
Yeah, that might be it actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll try something with that maybe.
Yeah,
Uh,
you get parenting advice on this podcast too. So if your
there you
kids don't
go.
want something, try like tossing it down the hallway and making them run and grab it in their teeth like a tiger.
Exactly. They'd probably think that was fun. I don't know if I'm going to do that
Probably
one
would actually.
though.
Whether it like the food or not, eating would be fun.
Right. Yeah. So, that's a source of frustration. Calvin giving his unnecessary commentary on mom's food. Mom also seems to be generally in charge of getting Calvin to take baths. Occasionally, dad is involved, but usually it's mom. And, we could maybe do an episode on baths, but I don't think there's really enough material for a whole episode. So I think maybe here we can just briefly talk about some of the things that Calvin does to get out of taking baths. So, a few methods that I can think of. There's just the simple running away. That's, the first strip where he takes a bath. That's pretty much what he's doing. There's also straddling the tub so that she has to come push him in. This is a fifth strip. Where, an
Oh
alien
no,
comes
an
to push him
alien
in.
comes to push him in. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another fifth strip where he's fighting back while in the tub. Oh, you got shampoo in my eyes on purpose, sinister fiend. And well, if you'd stop thrashing around, maybe it wouldn't happen. And then there's a couple of cases where he hides to avoid going in the tub. So he hides in the chimney. He hides inside a vacuum cleaner bag somehow. She never would have found me if I hadn't sneezed.
Then he really needed a bath.
Yeah. And that's also the same one where he pays Hobbs to take his bath for him. So that's another way of trying to avoid the bath. In a related strip, he has Hobbs secretly join him in the tub, and then Calvin gets out, and Hobbs disguises himself with Bubbles, and Calvin gets Dad's hat and tie as part of the disguise, and it becomes a whole thing.
That's also an instance of the parents again just calling each other dear, right? Because then we hear, I think from off screen, it's like, "Dear, why are you in the bath and wearing your best hat?"
Yeah, yep. Which it's always a little weird to me that disguise worked, but okay.
Oh,
And then,
who else would be wearing the hat?
well, yeah, that's a good point. And then there's one where Calvin hides in the empty bathtub itself, and he's going, "She'll never look here," which I think is actually pretty clever. I think he's right.
I was going to say the same thing. That's very smart on Calvin's part.
Yeah.
And then one thing I think is funny, we also see him having fun in the bath on various occasions, which I think is typical also. I certainly remember as a child, I specifically received the whole, "Oh, you complained about having to take the bath, but now you don't want to get out" remark, at least on one time. So I think there are a lot of instances where Calvin has fun in the bath though. So like one that comes to mind is, this is kind of a favorite. He has some boats,
Mm-hmm.
and it's first he's just acting this as like, "Oh, Bradley, how lovely to take this sail. Oh yes, Marcia, blah blah blah." But they jump into the water. "Oh no, the water's scalding," and so they get burned on their body. then the wind sweeps them away, and then they get sucked down a whirlpool.
And get blasted by a waterfall, I think.
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, he has a lot of fun torturing poor Bradley and Marcia in
Mm-hmm.
the water there. There's also the famous cannonball depth charge strip,
Right.
yeah, where there's a waterfall going down the stairs. I don't know. What are some ones you can think of?
Well, so this isn't exactly fun in the bathtub, but there's an early one where Calvin climbs in the toilet and flushes it, and then you see him saying, "I'm done with my bath." And after he flushes it, he spins around, and then he's going, "Wee!" So he has fun in that sort of bath. There's also one where he goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, tidal wave, and splashes all the water out of the tub. So he enjoys that one. He seems to enjoy making the water not be in the tub anymore.
Yeah, which actually I remember doing that kind of thing too. I mean, not
Yep.
intentionally making the water go out of the tub, but man, the back and forth and having a big wave, and that's some
Yeah.
classic kid stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
and there's one where he's not exactly having fun, but he puts his ducky in the tub, not for companionship, but
to test for sharks,
exactly.
which
Yeah, so
that's prudent. I mean, let's
can't be too careful.
yeah. There's also, I think the duck might make another appearance too. There's one strip, this is just a single panel, and he's in the bath, and there's like every toy you can think of there. I
Mm,
think the duck, some boats, every other thing. And he also has an umbrella, and so mom says, let's draw the line at the umbrella.
yeah, well, and the shower is going.
Yeah, the shower is going,
Yeah.
which see, baths can be fun, even though you may not want to take them in the first place.
Yeah. The other one that I can also think of, he's not exactly having fun because he's complaining about being in the tub and that he's a genius and why is his childhood spent so much in the bathtub, but this whole time he's sculpting bubbles onto his head and he's got like these bubble like, horns on top of his head and stuff, and Hobbs is maybe a little skeptical that Calvin is in fact a genius.
Yeah,
So
there's a similar one where he says something like, Teddy Roosevelt said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." And then they kind of take a beat. He says, "But I doubt he was in the tub when he said that."
yeah, that's true.
Now, here's a question. So we know Calvin gets in trouble related to baths a lot. So either not wanting to take them or causing mayhem while he's supposed to be taking them. Like there's one where he marries Godzilla and like gets out and spits
Hmm.
water on his mother, and so he gets in trouble for that. But Ryan, when you were a kid, did you ever get in trouble in a way related to baths?
Probably. Uh, I mean, okay, I'm gonna you may or may not believe me, but I was a pretty good kid. But, every kid gets in trouble sometimes, so, probably. I can't think of a specific example though. Did you?
I did. So I also was a pretty good kid. I didn't get in trouble that much, but there's one time I definitely got in trouble related to a bath. And so here's what happened. So I had recently learned how to make paper boats. So like
Mm,
fold paper to make a boat. Okay. So I need to take a bath, right? I thought, it'd be fun in the bath to have little boats to play with. So I made myself several paper boats. Okay. So here I am in the bath. Here are the boats. And the boats were fine at first, but then eventually the thing about paper is it doesn't hold up in the water that well. It sort of starts to disintegrate and turn into a mushy, pulpy mess, right?
right.
Okay, so, well, that's too bad. I was having fun playing with the boats. However, clearly they're just disintegrating in the water, so I guess I can just leave them. All right,
Mm,
so all the remains of these boats go down the drain, and sometime in the not too distant future, there starts to be a problem with that drain. So eventually, it's found out that my boats have completely clogged up the drain, and I think it caused some kind of leak, and my parents had to pay for that. I don't remember all the details. Again, I was pretty young, but yeah, it turns out the disintegration was only partial, not complete when it comes to paper and water there.
all right. Well, listeners, you now know not to do that. So
Yeah.
once again, here we are educating you.
Yeah, we learned a lot in this advice for parents and for children. If you do
Right.
make paper boats, don't think they'll just disintegrate in the bathwater. They will not.
Right. Yeah. Which I think actually leads well. I'm actually going to do a good segue here, maybe.
Wow.
That yeah, imagine that. But
Like, really? Your dad?
on
Yeah.
this podcast,
Yeah.
she did. Your dad? uh, yeah. But so there's the typical frustrating things, and then there's the more destructive things, like clogging up a drain, or in Calvin's case, intentionally digging up the yard, making speed bumps, pounding nails into the coffee table. So, there was the one where he asked if mom needed anything pounded full of nails, and she said no. Maybe this was him just saying, oh, well, I'm going to do it anyway. It's two separate strips. But,
Yeah.
pounding nails into the coffee table. There's the one where he fights with his oatmeal. There's at least one where he gets mud all over the house, including apparently walking across the couch and then later throwing a water balloon at dad and telling him not to go in the house like that. There's one where we see mom in a towel dripping wet saying, you come back here and pick every one of those dead bugs out of my shampoo. So, stuff like that. And all of this puts me in mind of a poem from the indispensable Calvin and Hobbes that goes, my mother has eyes on the back of her head. I don't quite believe it, but that's what she said. She explained that she'd been so uniquely endowed to catch me when I did things not allowed. I think she must also have eyes on her rear. I've noticed her hindsight is unusually clear. And in that poem, the illustration is of her bent over, sweeping up a broken something, and on her bum, we see a couple of angry eyes.
Wow.
Yep.
I like the use of hindsight. That's pretty
Yeah.
clever,
Pretty
actually. That's a
clever.
nice one. Yeah, I think, and interestingly about some of those too, they weren't all Calvin like trying to be destructive. So, for instance, the pounding the nails into the table, I always got the impression that it was just like, oh, this would be fun. Hit a
Yeah.
nail, like not like, oh, I'm going to tear this up or whatever. Because there are some strips too where he's sort of intentionally trying to make a mess or tear things up, but this just kind of seemed like, I don't know, exuberance or something, to use Calvin's word from a
Well, yeah,
certain.
because mom is like, what on earth would make you do that? And he's like, is this some sort of trick question or what? What do you mean?
Yeah, it's like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm hitting nails in the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the speed bumps, I guess maybe he thought they could use speed bumps. It's like, oh, I don't know. You see speed bumps on the road. Maybe we need some in the yard, right? It didn't seem like there was any sort of malicious intent.
Right. Yeah, it's innocent, but still very frustrating.
Yeah. And of course, sometimes he gets blamed for things that really he's just the victim. So there's another time he doesn't just track mud on the couch, but there's bike tracks on the couch. But that was because his killer bicycle was chasing him through the house and he had to escape.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't his fault. They shouldn't have
Yeah, I'm
gotten him
not
the
really
dumb
sure why
bike in the
they
first
blamed
place.
it on him. Yeah, it was the bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things like that. You mentioned earlier one thing mom is usually in charge of is getting Calvin to bed. And one strip I really like in this regard is it starts with Calvin in bed, but then he kind of gets this, amused expression on his face and he sneaks up and then turns around, hey mom, haha, I'm up. Yay, look, I'm up. It's like, what are you doing? And it's not like he wanted to stay up to do any particular thing. It's just he wanted to get under her skin by being up, ah ha ha, you put me to bed, but I'm up, ha ha ha. And so
Yep.
he makes a big ruckus. She finally catches him, puts him to bed, looks all exhausted, and then we see Calvin saying, mom has to earn a night's respite from me.
Yep. So we get a little window into his attitude on that there. And
And
so, mom is understandably frustrated by all of this. And I don't know if there's a cause and effect relationship here, but she does have a kind of sarcastic streak that maybe in part at least comes from this that I think is worth highlighting. Now, not all of this is about Calvin getting in trouble, but for instance, Calvin one time asks if he can go skydiving, and she says, why don't you just play chicken on the railroad? I'm sure that would be a much cheaper way to toy with death. So we got that one.
So practical.
Yep. She puts a raincoat on him before he eats soup, and then he specifically acknowledges, I have a very sarcastic mother. And then there's one, I think maybe my favorite. Calvin tells dad that cigars are all the rage and he should smoke them, and mom walks by and just calmly says flatulence could be all the rage, but it would still be disgusting. What a comment. And dad says, nicely put, dear. So,
Yeah. I think
That's a good
Calvin
one.
even says, "Oh, I see," or something like that
Yep.
too. He seems to be convinced, actually.
Yeah, the sarcasm works in that case.
Yeah, and really the whole family is pretty sarcastic, which sort of makes it funny that they sometimes seem shocked or worried that Calvin is turning out that way. So,
Mm,
the one I specifically think of, one of my favorite strips, the one where Dad can't find his glasses, and then Calvin has his hair combed and the glasses, and says, "Calvin, go do something you hate. Being miserable builds character." And
yes.
then we see, Mom is laughing so hard she falls off the chair. And then Dad says, "Okay, the voice was a little funny, but that's still one darn sarcastic kid we're raising."
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, they're all sarcastic, so I'm not sure why he's so surprised. Dad's very sarcastic, and Mom and their kid is too.
He comes by it honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all of that aside, the sarcasm and the frustration and, maybe occasionally not dealing with a problem the best way, she's a good mom. She's doing the best she can. And so, I'll highlight quickly one questionable moment. She lets Calvin have a cigarette when he asks so that he can learn the hard way why smoking is a bad idea. And it works. I wouldn't take that approach myself, but it does seem to work. Also, as a side note, this strip refers to Calvin's grandpa, who has left those cigarettes behind. So it's hard to be sure if we're talking about mom's dad or dad's dad, but apparently at least one of Calvin's grandfathers smokes, and seems that the parents don't. So, they're setting a good example for him there, even if it may not have been the best teaching moment to let him actually smoke a cigarette to learn why it's bad.
Did we learn a little lesson?
Yes.
I think Hobbes says, "You'd think this would be an easy habit to break."
Right? Yeah. But in terms of being a good mom, there is the obvious. So she does, in fact, take care of Calvin. She makes him food. She tucks him in at night, all the, typical mom or dad stuff. She also makes him that onion costume we talked about for his school play. So, that wasn't easy to do. And she's clearly involved in his life and willing to help him with things that are not convenient for her.
Kids are not convenient, it turns out. At least
Yeah, not always. Yeah. She goes to parent teacher conferences with humorous results. She does try to, and just so you know, we're not going to drop that forever. We'll have an episode where we talk about those humorous results.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
she does at least try to get him to do his homework with varying levels of success. And as we've said, she does seem to try to encourage him in his interests, including science, and also just having some independence, going out and playing and being a kid.
One thing I want to add too is that there are even some instances of her sort of deliberately imparting wisdom on Calvin. Like we've talked about how we see this more with Calvin's dad. So when he's not giving the sort of bogus explanations of things, he really is trying to teach his son how to be a good person and understand life, build character, that sort of thing. But there are some instances of mom doing this too. One that comes to mind is Calvin starts off trying to kind of shock her. He says something like, "Mom, can I have some money to buy a record from a Satan worshiping band?" There's something else about it too, but clearly some inappropriate band. And she says, "Calvin, the fact that these bands haven't killed themselves in ritual self-sacrifice means that they're just in it for the money like everyone else." He's like, "I can't trust mainstream commercial nihilism." Afraid not, kiddo. So it's like it's not as direct or in the same way that dad talks to him, but it's sort of like, "Look, here I'm going to give you some moral instruction, but in this very kind of down to earth sense about not being able to trust everything you see or famous people or what people make money from." And so we do get that kind of thing from her from time to time.
Yeah, I also like that she says, if you want to shock and provoke, at least be sincere about it.
That's right. It's like it's a call to authenticity too. So yeah. So there's that kind of thing from her, and we occasionally see her kind of giving him a lesson, although we don't always hear this. Like there's one where she's explaining the value of good work habits or something, but actually we just get Calvin's internal monologue while this is going on. It's like, "Well, mom's never been as big as the galaxy, so she can't understand how someone else could. And that's why I wasn't doing my homework." And, "Oh, she looks like she's wrapping up. Better nod and smile." And we just see her Well, good. I'm glad we had this little talk. So
Right.
presumably she was giving useful life advice there, even though we don't hear what it was.
Or neither does Calvin, apparently.
Right.
Yeah. And, on top of giving useful life advice and doing all these things for him, she also, at least in one instance, plays with him, which, gives us to assume that she plays with him off screen, when we don't see sometimes. But the one that springs to mind is she's chasing him around the house and I'm going to get you. I'm going to tickle you. She's trying to wear him out. So she does have that kind of ulterior motive, but she also seems to be genuinely enjoying playing with Calvin.
Yeah.
And Calvin's having a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the
And
plan doesn't work, of course.
right, yeah, she's all worn out and he's wound up, but yeah, she's having fun with him. It's kind of an answer to the dad building snowman strips that here's mom spending this important time with Calvin.
That's
And
true.
well, and just on a similar note, it's not exactly playing with him, but she did actually make him his stupendous man outfit. So for better or for worse, with respect to her own stress level, she was involved in that aspect of Calvin's play.
That's right. And I guess we don't know this for sure, but the sense I always got was that this was spontaneous too. Like we don't see Calvin ever ask for this. The first sense we get is he's showing Hobbs like, "Oh, look what mom made me, a superhero outfit." So
Yeah,
I always interpreted that as she just thought this would be something her son would enjoy and something nice she could do for him. So she spontaneously makes him this outfit, which
right.
I mean, not that it's still not nice if he did ask for it, but I think it's even nicer if this was just her own idea of something to do to make her son happy there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, on that note, it's also funny to me how she's the one who first makes the costume, but she still becomes the villainous mom lady. And then there's times where he says, she can't discover my secret identity. It's like she
Yeah.
gave you the costume.
Right. Yeah. Although that also tracks, I with my daughter, we've played PJ Masks. She has a little costume and she'll put it on and she wants me to be the bad guy,
Right.
chase her around or whatever. It makes sense. So,
Yeah, it does. So no, that was always a cute aspect of that, I thought
yeah.
though. It's
Yes, yeah,
like
I like that she can't discover my secret identity. I'm sorry, what? Yeah.
yeah, which also is funny because there's other ones where like he gets I mean, Stupendous Man doesn't succeed a whole lot, but in one particular episode, he says to Hop something like, "Well, Mom threatened to take away my costume for
Yeah.
good." Blah blah blah. Like, okay, so clearly, Mom Lady is in on this whole thing. Because you're not really protecting your identity here, but that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah. In terms of, again, just being a good mom, she's also often the one that Calvin goes to for comfort. So, when he finds the little raccoon, he goes to get mom. You don't get to be mom if you can't fix everything just right.
Yeah, he just
And
assumes she'll be able to fix it.
yeah. And then in contrast to the one where she shuns him, the controversial my biological mother thing, there is a time where Calvin is in a bad mood and she does in fact get him a comic book and she makes him a snack and helps him get cozy on the couch. And he says, Mom knows everything.
Yeah, which is funny that in that one it's exactly what he was talking about in the other one. So that it almost adds an additional dynamic to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, mom can do this for you sometimes. She can't do it for you every time, but she does comfort you.
Yeah,
And
I think I could be wrong about this. I think the one where she does do that comes later,
yeah, I believe so.
but it's almost funnier if you think of it in the other order because it's like,
Yeah.
what's
Why aren't you
this?
doing that again?
Yeah, I thought my mom, well, my biological mom would have done this. I don't know who you are now because you're not doing it this time. But
Yeah, I like that interpretation that in the second one he's saying, You're not my biological mother, you've done something with her.
that's right. Which again, that has happened before. Do you remember when we had an imposter mom?
Yes, it was fairly late in the strip. So he's Calvin's walking along and he's like, I don't remember there being a door here before. And then this horrible imitation of his mom pops out. It's this puppet.
Yeah,
And he's like, You're not my mom. Oh, of course I am. Here, eat your oatmeal. And then he realizes he's basically in this terrarium with these giant aliens trying to experiment on him.
it was like, oh no, he's on to us. He figured out it's a simulation or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think then when he wakes up from what turned out to be a dream, she comes and he's like, "Prove you're my mom."
Yeah. So there you go. I like that interpretation of that strip. Let's go
Yeah,
with
you gotta
that.
watch out for those imposters.
Yeah.
You know what? On that note, this is a bit of a side note here, but it seems like imposters played a big role in like childhood cartoons and shows.
Mm.
Like it always seemed like, your normal people are the hero, and they're like, oh no, here's this shapeshifter or something. So I feel like as kids we're kind of primed to worry about that. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like shapeshifting was a big danger in children's
Does show
entertainment.
up. That and quicksand. Quicksand is not nearly as dangerous as cartoons would have you believe, or at
Yeah,
least not as common.
yeah, it might even be both. Like I'm not sure I've ever actually run into quicksand, even though yeah, in cartoons and stuff they did all the time. And I think it's not as deadly as it's supposed to be in shows and stuff. Like it's really unlikely to kill you. Something, but I'm not
Yeah.
saying go play in quicksand.
Right.
So that's yeah, like do not attempt. We'll just throw that out here. But
Right.
yeah, no, I don't know. It's kind of funny, like the dangers we think of as being associated with life as children versus what you actually run into.
Also, black holes. When I was a kid, I thought that was something that astronauts might actually run into, and yeah, not so much. But
To be fair, that's just because we can't get to them. I guess if you did get near them, it would be as dangerous as their
well,
push.
yeah, I just think you would have pretty decent warning before you got to that point. But yeah,
That's true. That reminds
uh,
me. I forget exactly what this was. It was something about the spaceship. Oh no, we lost control and it's headed straight for the sun. And they're like, oh no, we're gonna burn up in the sun. And someone says, oh, don't worry, we won't burn up in the sun. Really? No, we'll pass out and die from heat stroke long before we actually, something like
yeah,
that.
that's right. I don't remember what that was from, but I remember something like that.
Yeah. But
Uh,
back to Tom.
yeah. Other examples. So when Calvin is sick, so other examples of mom comforting Calvin. When he's sick, he calls for her specifically, not dad, somewhat to mom's dismay. What,
And
me?
Dad
What's wrong with
relieved.
you?
Yeah, quiet, honey. I'm trying to sleep. He called for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And also when Hobbs is lost, although mom does chastise Calvin for not taking better care of his toys, she does also help him find Hobbs in both instances, the one where the dog steals Hobbs and the one where Calvin leaves Hobbs in the woods in the Yukon story.
Right. And she's actually a lot more sympathetic than Calvin's dad is. So, I mean, part of this could be a coincidence. Dad doesn't appear in the dog stealing Hobbs arc at all, I don't think.
No,
So
I don't
maybe
think
that's
so.
not a fair comparison in that case. But more to the point, in the other one where he does have to search for Hobbs in the woods, Dad has to be strongly encouraged, let's say, to do this. So someone says, "Oh, he's really upset." I
Oh, I
bet he is.
bet.
No, no, he's really upset. Yeah, I said, I bet he is. No, he's really upset. Ah, okay. My dad have done this? Of course not. I was never spoiled like this. So he's much more reluctant about helping in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I would agree that she's a good mom. I mean, and aside from the things we said already, maybe the biggest sign of this is just the fact that she keeps on doing all this mom stuff despite all the aggravation and ingratitude. So she really seems to make an effort to try to make things nice for Calvin and Calvin's dad, even though, like we've talked about, there's seldom any overt appreciation.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not to say that there never is any, and there's kind of an interesting contrast this reminds me of. So there's there's two cases where we can kind of juxtapose Calvin not being all that grateful and sort of explicitly being what I guess we'll call grateful, but you'll see in a second. So there's one Mother's Day card that he gives to her that has a poem, and I'm sure you remember some of the lines from this poem.
Oh, I can say the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so for instance, I mean, so well, rather than the whole thing, how about just saying how it ends?
Well, yeah. So the last bit is Happy Mother's Day to you. There, I've said it. Now I'm done. So how about getting out of bed and cooking breakfast for your son?
Yes. So yeah, so he makes her a card, but it's a poem, fairly creative poem, really, but it's all about how he needs her to do things and his allowance is too small and he wants breakfast, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
maybe not the best Mother's Day card she could have
Well,
gotten.
and I love how that one, there's a throwaway joke because that's a Sunday strip. And so it starts out with, Mom, how do I love you? Let me count the ways. One. Number one. Number one.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I mean maybe this is just me, but if I say, how do I love you? Let me count the ways, like what is it I'm counting?
Yeah, I'm
Ways?
not sure what we're going for with that.
Yeah, if it's just things I love about you, that might make sense. But how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. To me, that's a really weird phrase. Maybe it's just a generational thing, but
Yeah, it could be.
yeah. But on a similar note, and this is kind of the juxtaposition, we sort of get both. So I think actually I may be thinking of two different things. So there's one where his mother gets sick
Mhm.
and he wants to make her a card. And this part's similar. It's like, because my bed isn't made, my clothes aren't folded, and I'm hungry. And he says
Yeah,
to
get
Hobbs,
well
"Oh, do you
soon.
want
Yeah.
to? Yeah, do you want to sign it? Sure, I'm hungry too." And so,
Yeah.
so there's that. But in a different instance, maybe in the same general arc, his
I think
mom's
it's the
sick.
same arc. Yeah.
Okay, and he comes in and he says, "Well, when I'm sick, you read me a story. Do you want me to read you a story?" And no, I just want to sleep or whatever. And he says, "It's hard for a mom to be a mom."
Yeah.
So that, even though that's not sort of explicitly, "Oh, mom, I appreciate all you do," the sense I always got from that was basically implying that, like him saying, "Oh, wow, mom does all these things for me, and it's hard, and now I don't know how to take care of her like she does me," that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, there's some acknowledgement. Yeah.
Yeah, which is good too. I mean, it's kind of like you mentioned parallels to the Dad and Calvin building the snowman strip here. I think that's an instance where we get a similar kind of thing with Mom.
Right.
Yeah, Calvin isn't always an ingrateful brat. He actually does love his mom and does recognize how much she does for
Yeah. And I mean, of course, the strip is meant to be funny, so most of the time we're going to see the frustrating moments because those lend themselves to humor more.
him.
But,
Right.
every once in a while we get a little window into, yeah, Calvin does appreciate what his mom's doing, and that's good.
Yeah.
Now, this leads me kind of into one last thing that I want to highlight. She helps Calvin find Hobbs. She plays with him. She does all these things for him. And I think we ought to talk about Mom's relationship with Hobbs just a little. So we've talked before about instances where Mom interacts with Hobbs differently than Dad does. For instance, in the raccoon story, she talks to Hobbs even with Calvin not around. She says, "I'm not sure this little guy's going to make it, Hobbs. You can tell I'm upset when I start talking to you."
Yeah.
Or the Yukon story, she calls out for Hobbs while she and Dad are searching for him. And, she does feel sheepish about it later, but she goes, "Hobbs!" And so,
Dad just kind of stares at her. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah,
then there's,
that's actually just side note. That's one of my favorite moments of the strip when she calls out Hobbs, because I don't know, I always just find that particularly touching.
yeah. Well, and, and then there's another comic. I think there's one that's just a kind of a bonus thing in one of the early books where Calvin is holding Hobbs up and she's kissing him goodnight and kind of rolling her eyes, but kissing Hobbs goodnight.
Yeah,
And then there's a couple of others also where she kisses him goodnight. If you don't get a goodnight kiss, you get Kafka dreams and stuff like that. So, all this to say, I think maybe Hobbs is a little more real to Mom than to Dad. And so actually, I talked to my wife about this because when we said it in the Sunday Strip episode, she listened and she had some thoughts. And I thought instead of me trying to summarize what she said, we could maybe just have her as a guest.
yeah.
So, yeah, so just a second. So, joining us is my lovely wife
Carrie.
and also my daughter.
Have you both on?
Yeah. So, we were just talking about how Mom maybe sees Hobbs a little differently than Dad sees Hobbs, that she interacts with him a little more as if he were real. And I know you had some thoughts on that. So, what in your mind might lead Mom to interact with Hobbs a little more like he's a real animal?
Well, the two examples that you gave previously were the time that Hobbs gets left in the woods and the story about the injured raccoon. And in both of those storylines, Calvin is feeling an extreme emotion. He is terrified that Hobbs is lost, and he's just devastated that he has to go to bed without Hobbs. And with the little raccoon, he's become so attached to this raccoon, and he's so scared about what's going to happen, and his little heart is going to break if the raccoon doesn't make it. And so when he's feeling these strong emotions, I think Calvin's mom's maternal instincts and her love for her child kick in to high gear. And so she's not looking at this purely as a logical, okay, well, let's retrace your steps. Where could this stuffed animal be? His strong feeling and his pain is at the forefront of her mind. And so rather than just responding rationally, she's feeling that emotion. And so she responds emotionally as well. And so, she's not thinking just, I've got to find the stuffed animal. She's empathizing with Calvin's fear. And, we've got to find Hobbs. We've got to find Hobbs. And so when she calls out Hobbs, it's no surprise to me at all, because that's what she's thinking about most. She's thinking about how much Calvin needs to find Hobbs and what that means to him.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a really good point. It also makes me think of the one where someone breaks into their house and dad is taking inventory of, the TV's missing, whatever, talking to the police. Mom says, we're looking for Hobbs because Calvin is freaking out about where's Hobbs? We've got to find him. Mom and dad say he's not valuable. Well, I think he's valuable. Well, maybe mom does think he's valuable because she's not worrying about anything else until they find Hobbs. She's helping Calvin find him.
Right. Hobbs is valuable to Calvin. Calvin is valuable to her. Therefore, Hobbs is valuable to her.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So yeah, I think that the connection between a mom and child can maybe help that mom or dad, as the case may be, to treat the stuffed animal, the way that the child treats the stuffed animal.
Yeah, I agree. I think we see this in the strip too, and the kind of difference in the interactions between like mom and Hobbs versus dad and Hobbs. And so this is maybe a little subtle, but it seems to me mom is also more prone to calling Hobbs by name than Calvin's dad is. So there's a lot of strips where dad will say, oh, Calvin's tiger or his toys, or even in an early strip put Hobbs kind of in quotes explicitly. Mom doesn't usually do this. She typically just says Hobbs' name. And so this, again, it's kind of a small detail, but to me, that's kind of a sign of what you and your wife are pointing out, that it does seem like she interacts with Hobbs in a more similar way to Calvin than Calvin's dad does.
Yeah. And so, I think that's a good place to wrap up, that all these things show us that Calvin's mom is a really good mom. She loves him. She is doing her best to take care of him. And it makes the strip, again, as we've said before, really charming. That, yeah, it's funny. And I love Calvin and Hobbs because it's funny. And that's what first drew me to it. But it winds up being more than that, because we get all these other facets that really help draw you in. So,
exactly. And even with, like, remember in the Yukon arc, so he supposedly secedes from his family and he comes back and he's kind of sheepish. I guess he's the prodigal son here almost. He says, oh, mom, I want to be your kid again. And she gives him this big hug. You'll always be my kid. And that kind of thing. So yeah, it's like we said in the dad episode, where we, despite all the aggravation and getting in trouble, whatever, they really do have this good relationship. And the same is true with Calvin and his mom. There really is this loving core at the relationship of all their interactions. So despite the funny misbehavior, that's in the end how they end up relating.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, if you have any other favorite mom comics or insights about mom that you'd like to share with us, we would, as always, love to hear from you. You can email us at magiccandh@proton.me, MAGICCANDH at proton.me. There'll be a link in the show notes. We always love to hear from you.
And remember, this is a free podcast and an ad-free podcast. So this is all about just celebrating this comic strip and having fun and taking joy in what is brought to us. So we would love for any of our listeners or people to come along with us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for the ride. Let's go exploring. You've been listening to The Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. We'll be releasing 40 episodes all throughout the year, from November 18th, 2025 to November 18th, 2026, to celebrate the 40th anniversary. Our intro and outro music is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, referenced in the Calvin and Hobbes strip published on October 8, 1986. This rendition was performed by the Skidmore College Orchestra and made available under a Creative Commons license on museopen.com. We hope you'll join us next episode for more fun.